Hello everyone, welcome to Simplilearn. Today we'll be learning how to generate pattern programs in C. Before we get started, I hope the screen is clearly visible and audio is fine. If yes, please type in yes. If there are any issues, do let us know in the chat section so that we can resolve. I see a lot positive responses. Great. Let's wait for some time for others to join us. Great. I think we can get started. This session is on pattern programs in C. So, we'll be covering star pattern, number pattern, alphabet pattern programs, and some special patterns. We'll discuss almost all frequently asked interview pattern questions. And while we are at it, please leave us a like if you find our content helpful, and a sub to the channel would be appreciated. First, let's get started with the right angle triangle star pattern program. Pattern programs are performed in the form of a matrix, where we have rows and columns. And to print the right angle triangle pattern, the star arrangements are made in the form of a matrix, where first row has 1 star, second row has 2 stars, and third row has 3 stars, and so on. We have inserted stars at the cell index E of 0, 0, E of 1, 0, 1, 1, then E of 2, 1, 2, 2, 2, 3, followed by A of 3, 1 to A of 3, 4, and then A of 4, 1 up to A of 4, 5. And in the rest of the cells, we have a free spaces. Moving ahead, let's understand the program logic. We have outer loop for rows and inner loops for columns. So first, the control will check the condition. Initially, the I value is 1. So 1 lesser or equal to rows. So rows, if the rows value is 5, then 1 lesser or equal to 5, which is true. So the control comes to the inner for loop and again checks the condition. Initially, the J value is 1. So 1 lesser or equal to 1, the condition is satisfied. So it prints the statement under the inner for loop. That is, it prints the stars. So again, the control goes back to the inner for loop and increment the J value by 1. Now, J value is 2. So 2 lesser or equal to 1, which is false. So it comes out of the inner for loop and prints a statement under the outer for loop. And the control transfers to the new line. It again goes back to the outer for loop and increment the I value by 1. So this loop will continue until all stars are printed. So now let's run the program and see the output. As you all can see my screen, this is the code for the right angle triangle pattern program. So here we have the counter variable ij and rows is initialized to 5. So as I discussed before, the first star will be printed in the first row first column, and when this I value is incremented by 1, then it prints the second row first column, and then second row second column, and so on until it prints all the stars. So now let's run the program and see the output. And here we go. The stars are printed in a form of a right angle triangle. Next we have inverted right angle triangle pattern program. So this is the image, where we have 5 stars in the first row, 4 stars in the second row, and 3 stars in the third row, and so on. And the rest of the cells we have the free spaces. So let's look at the logic and try to understand. We have outer for loop for rows and inner for loop for columns. So initially I is equal to 5. So 5 greater equal to 1, which is true. So the control comes to the inner for loop, and initially J value is 1. So 1 lesser or equal to 5, which is true. So prints the first star. And again the control go back and increment J value by 1. So now J value is equal to 2. 2 lesser or equal to 5, again true. So executes the statement under the inner for loop. Prints the second star. So this will repeat until the condition is not satisfied. So once the control comes out and the control transfers to the new line. So again, it goes to the outer for loop and decrement I value by 1. So now I value is 4. So 4 greater or equal to 1, which is 2. So comes back to the inner for loop, and this will repeat until it forms a pattern of inverted right angle triangle. So now let's execute a program and look at the output. So in this program, we have counter variables ing and the rows are initialized to 5. So in our previous program, we had an operator lesser or equal to and pre-increment. But in this program, we have greater or equal to and pre-decrement operator. So as I said, first it will print 5 stars in the first row and then 4 stars and then 3 stars and so on. So now let's execute and see the output. As you all can see, the inverted right angle triangle is printed successfully. Next pattern is arrow shaped pattern. As you can see, we are trying to combine our previous two patterns into one. That is right angle triangle and inverted right angle triangle. Let's have a look at the code. So here, the half of the code is for the first half of the pattern and the second half is for the second half of the pattern. The only difference in the code is that we have row minus 1. So let's first run the program to get a better understanding. So here, let's run the program. As you all can see the pattern, to get 5 stars in one row, we have row minus 1. So the only difference between the previous code and this is that we have row minus 1. The code that I'm executing in this session will be attached in the description box below. So you can have a look at it and execute the pattern programs for a better understanding. And if you face any issues while executing the programs, then please let us know in the comment section below and our team of experts will be happier to resolve all your queries at the earliest. Alright. Our next pattern program is mirrored right angle triangle. Let's understand this pattern in a form of a matrix. In our first pattern program, where we had first star followed by 4 spaces, in this we have 4 spaces first and then 1 star, then 3 spaces and 2 stars, followed by 2 spaces and 3 stars and so on. So let's have a look at the logic. So as you can see here, in order to print the spaces first, we have a for loop where we have j is equal to 2 into row minus 1, j greater or equal to 0 and then j minus minus, which is the post decrement operator. So initially the I value is 0 and 0 lesser to 5 then comes and prints the spaces first and then j is equal to 0 where 0 lesser or equal to 0, which is true, and prints the star first. And then when the condition is not satisfied, it comes out and the control transfers to the new line, goes back and increment the I value by 1. So now I value is 1, so 1 lesser to 5, which is true, and comes print the spaces. So this will repeat until it prints all these stars. So now let's execute the program. So in this program we have counter variable ing and row value is equal to 5, and this 2 for loops we have for rows and then next for loop is for columns. So now let's try to execute it. And here we got the output. The mirrored right angle triangle is printed successfully. Next, inverted mirrored right angle triangle pattern. It is similar to the previous pattern, but the pattern is inverted. So here, as you can see, first we have 5 stars and the second row we have first space and then followed by 4 stars, then 2 spaces followed by 3 stars and so on. So here let's see the logic. So as you can see here, it first prints the blank spaces. Similar to our previous program, here also we have for loop to print the blank spaces. And here again we have a k counter variable to print the stars. So let's execute the program and see the output. As you all can see, this is the program for our inverted mirrored right angle triangle. So here we have three variables, the counter variables I, j and k, and the row value is equal to 5. So initially the I value is equal to 5. So it checks the condition whether 5 greater or equal to 1, which is true. So comes to this for loop and checks j is equal to 5. So 5 greater to 5, which is false. So it will not print any blank spaces. So the control comes to this for loop where k is equal to 1 and checks the condition 1 lesser or equal to 5. It's true. So prints the first star. And again it goes back and increment the k value by 1. So now the k value is 2. Then checks the condition 2 lesser or equal to 5, which is true, prints the star, and this will continue up to it prints the 5 stars in first row. And then the control comes out and jumps to the new line. That means the control transfers to the new line. Then again it goes back and decrement the I value by 1. So now the I value is 4. 4 greater or equal to 1, again the condition is satisfied, comes, prints the spaces, and this will continue until it prints all the stars. So now let's run the program. And here we got the output. Our next pattern is mirrored arrow shaped star pattern. So in this pattern program, we are combining our previous two pattern programs. That is mirrored right angle triangle pattern program and inverted mirrored right angle triangle program. So now let's have a look at the code. So here the first half of the code is for the first half of the pattern and the second half of the code is for the second half of the pattern. So to understand it in a better way, let's execute the program. So in this program, we have counter variables I, j and k and the rows is 5. So as I said, the first half of the program is for the first half of the pattern. So here we have the for loops for the rows and this for loop is for the columns, and for the second pattern we have this for loop for the rows and then this for loop for the columns. So let's run the program. So here we got the output. Next we have pyramid star pattern program. As you all can see, we have first two spaces followed by one star and then two spaces, and in the next row we have space first and then star, space, star, space, and the third row we have star and then followed by space, star, space and star. So to understand this pattern, how it works, let's look at the code. As you can see the code here, we have I is equal to 0. So initially the I value is 0 and 0 less than 5, which is true. So comes to the next for loop where j is equal to row minus 1. So 5 minus 0 is 5. So 5 greater than 1, which is true. So it prints the first space. And this will continue until the condition is satisfied. Once the condition is not satisfied, it comes out of the for loop. So it checks the initial j value is 0. So 0 lesser or equal to 5, which is true. So it prints the first star. So when it prints two spaces and then one star, and it goes back and print two spaces again. So once the condition is not satisfied, it comes out and the control transfers for the new line. Once the control transferred to the new line, it goes back to the first for loop and increment I value by 1. So now I value is equal to 1. So then it prints the second row stars. So this way it repeats until all stars are printed in the form of a pyramid. So let's run the program and see the output. So as you can see, the row value is 5 and we have the counter variable I and j for rows for printing the blank space and then a loop for a printing star. So now, as I discussed before, it print 2 spaces first and then star and followed by 2 spaces in the first row. So let's try to execute this program. And here we go. We got a star pattern in the form of a pyramid. Next we have inverted pyramid star pattern program. So in this pattern, as we can see, the first row we have first star, then space, then the second star and followed by space and third star. And the second row we have space, star, and then space. And the third row we have 2 spaces and then star and 2 spaces. It's just similar to the previous pattern, but it is just inverted. So let's have a look at the code. So here we have for loop for rows and then for loops for columns. So this for loops is to print the blank spaces, and the next for loop is to print the stars. So here initially the I value is 0 and 0 lesser or equal to 5 minus 1, that is 4. So the condition is satisfied, comes down to the next for loop where j initial value is 0. So 0 lesser or equal to 4, which is true, and prints these blank spaces. And then once the condition is not satisfied, it comes out where k value is 0. So the 0 is lesser or equal to rows minus 1 minus I. If this condition is satisfied, the star is printed. So once the condition is not satisfied, the control transfers to the new line. So now let's try to run the program. So here in this code we have 3 counter variables, that is I, j and k, and row is initialized to 5. So here we have 2 for loops where it is used to print the blank spaces, and then we have the other for loop which prints the star. So now let's try to execute it. And here we got the pattern. This is the inverted pyramid star pattern. Our next pattern program is upper inverted pyramid and lower pyramid. So we have already performed the inverted upper pyramid and also the regular lower pyramid. So now let's have a look at the code. So this for loop, these statements are for the upper inverted pyramid, which we have already executed. And then next we have the other code for the lower pyramid. So the only difference is that here we use rows minus 1. So let's see why do we use that. So we are trying to combine the patterns that we have already executed, that is the upper inverted pyramid and lower pyramid. So for that we have the for loops for the upper inverted pyramids that we have already discussed, and here the only difference is that we have used rows minus 1. And next we have the lower pyramid. Again here also we have used rows minus 1. So let's see, try to execute and see the output. So as you can see, here we have the 1 star. So in order to print in this pattern, we have used rows minus 1. If we just give rows, then we'll get a 1 more extra star in between this. So I hope you got it. Up next we have right diagonal star pattern. So let's understand in a logic. So here first we have 4 spaces, then 1 star, followed by 3 spaces, 1 star and then space, and the third row we have 2 spaces, 1 star and 2 spaces, and so on. So in order to print in a right diagonal star pattern, let's understand the logic behind it. So for that, let's look at the code. So initially we have I value is equal to 1. So 1, it checks the condition whether 1 is lesser or equal to 5, which is true. So comes to the inner for loop where j value is 0. So 0 lesser than 5 minus I, which is 1. So 5 minus 1 is 4. So 0 lesser than 4, which is true, and then it prints the blank space. So this will continue until the given condition is satisfied. Once the condition is false, it comes out, the control will come out and print the star, and then it jumps to the new line. Again, it goes back and increment the I value, and this will repeat until it prints the right diagonal star pattern. So now let's run the code and have a look at the. So as you all can see, we have two counter variables I and j, where we have the row value to be 5. So as I discussed before, this for loop is used to print the blank spaces. Once the condition is false, it will come out, the control will come out and print the star and goes back to the new line. So now let's try to execute. And here we go. We got the right diagonal star pattern program. Next we have X star pattern program. So let's try to understand the logic. So here we have the first star and then followed by 3 spaces and then star. And the second row we have space, star, and space. And the third row we have 1 star in between the 2 spaces. And similarly we have third row and fourth row. So now let's have a look at the code. So here in this code we have I is equal to rows, then I must be greater or equal to 1, that is 5 is greater or equal to 1, which is true, so comes to the inner for loop where j value is I, then j must be lesser to rows. So if this condition satisfied, it prints the spaces. Once the condition is not satisfied, it comes to the next for loop where j value is equal to 1. And then it checks the condition where 1 is lesser or equal to 2 into I minus 1. If the condition is satisfied, it comes to the if condition where j is equal to 1 or j is equal to 2 into I minus 1. If the condition is satisfied, it prints the star, else it will print the space. If the condition is not satisfied, the control comes and it transfers to the new line. And our next half of the program prints the lower invented V pattern. So here we have for loop where I is equal to 2 and I must be lesser or equal to rows. So if the condition is satisfied, it comes to the for loop where j is equal to I, j lesser than rows. So if the condition is satisfied, it prints the spaces. Else it will come to the next for loop where j is equal to 1 and 1 must be lesser or equal to 2 into I minus 1. And then if this condition satisfied, it comes and checks the if condition where j is equal to 1 or j is equal to 2 into I minus 1. So this code is used to print the lower invented V pattern. So now let's run the program. As I discussed before, we have a counter variables I and j and row value is initialized to 5. So here the first half of the program is used to print a V shape, and the next half of the program is used to print the lower invented V pattern. So now let's try to run it. And here we go. So this is our first V and this is our second invented V, which is in the form of X star pattern. The next pattern that we have is invented V pattern. So let's have a look at the logic. So as you can see, this is very much similar to our pyramid pattern, but the only difference is that we don't have a star here. So now let's have a look at the logic. So the logic of a program is that the out variable is equal to 1. So 1 must be lesser or equal to rows. So if the condition is satisfied, it comes to the inner for loop where in is equal to 1 and in must be lesser or equal to rows into 2. So if this condition is satisfied, the control comes to the if-else statement where it tries to execute or check the condition where in must be equal to x or it should be equal to y. If the condition is satisfied, it prints the star, else it will print the space. So now let's try to execute the program. So here we have the variable out and in, where the row value 5 is initialized to x and y. So now let's try to execute. And here we go. We got the invented V pattern. So moving ahead, let's have a look at the next pattern. And our next pattern is V-shaped star pattern. So to understand, let's have a look at the logic. So this is very much similar to our previous pattern, but it is just inverted. So for that, let's have a look at the code. So in the given code, the difference is that we have I is equal to n minus 1. So the I value must be greater or equal to 0. If the condition satisfied, it comes to a for loop where j is equal to n minus 1. So if j is greater than I, then it prints the space. If the condition is not satisfied, then it comes out and prints the star. Then it comes to the next for loop where j is equal to 1, j lesser than I into 2. So if j is lesser than I into 2, it prints the space. Then it comes to the if condition where I is greater or equal to 1. If I is greater than or equal to 1, it prints the star, and then the control transferred to the new line. So now let's try to run the program. So as I said, the n value is equal to 5. So it is just similar to our previous program and pattern where it is just in an inverted form. So now let's try to execute it. So here we got the output. The V star pattern is formed. Up next we have a pyramid shaped star pattern. So we have already executed a pattern based on a pyramid, but the only difference in this type of pyramid is that we have a hollow pyramid. So let's have a look at the logic. So previously we had stars in between, but in this type of a pyramid we are not going to have a stars in between of a pyramid. So for that, let's have a look at the logic. So here we have a counter variable I, j and k. So first it checks the initial value of I is equal to 1, where 1 should be lesser or equal to rows. So if rows value is 5, then 1 is lesser or equal to 5. Then if the condition is satisfied, it comes to the inner for loop where the j initial value is 1, so 1 must be lesser to rows. So if this condition is satisfied, it will print the space. If it does not satisfy, it comes to the next for loop where k value is 1. So 1 must be lesser or equal to 2 into I minus 1. Then if this condition is satisfied, it comes to the if else statements where the k must be equal to 1 or I is equal to rows or k is equal to 2 into I minus 1. So if this is true, then it prints this star pattern, else it will print this space. So wherever it is required to print the star, it prints the star, else it will print the space. And if this condition does not satisfy, it comes out and the control transfers to the new line. And then again, it will increment the I value by 1. And this loop will repeat. So here, let's try to execute the program and see the output. So as I said, this if-else statement prints the star wherever it is required and space wherever it is required. So now let's try to execute it. So as I said, it can be a triangle, but it's a hollow. Okay, next we have an inverted star pyramid. It is very much similar to our previous pyramid, but the only difference is that it is inverted. So let's have a look at the logic. It is similar to the previous logic, but it's just inverted. So in the first row, we have 3 stars where first star, then space, again star, space, star. And in the second row, we have 2 stars. And in the third row, we have 1 star in between 2 spaces. So now let's have a look at the code. So here the first for loop is used to print the spaces. So the next for loop is used to print the stars. So when the condition is true, it prints a star, else it will print the space. And once the condition is false, the control comes out and enter to the new line. So then again it decrements the I value. So here we have the I minus minus, which is the post decrement operator. So now let's try to run the program. So as I discussed before, we have I, j and k counter variables and row value is equal to 5. So this for loop is used to print the spaces, and if condition satisfied, it prints the star wherever it is required and space wherever it is required. So now let's try to run the program. And here we got the output. It's a inverted star pyramid. Next, we are going to have a look at the box pattern. So in this pattern, the number of rows and columns must be equal. So the only change is that the first row will have 5 stars and the next row will have 2 stars and 3 spaces in between, and similarly the third and fourth row and fifth row will have 5 stars. So now let's have a look at the code. So here the initially I value is equal to 1. So if the condition satisfied, it comes to the inner for loop where j initial value is 1. So j must be lesser to m. So n is for the rows and m is for the columns. So here we have if statement where I must be equal to 1 or I must be equal to n, or j should be equal to 1 or j should be equal to m. So if this condition is satisfied, it prints the star, else it will print the space. And once the condition is not satisfied, the control comes out and transfers to the new line and again goes back to the outer for loop and increment the I value by 1. So now let's have a look at the code. So here in this program, as you all can see, the n value is 10 and m value is also 10. So that means the number of rows and the number of columns are equal. So here, as per this if-else statement, it prints stars wherever it is required and prints space where it is necessary. So now let's try to run the program. So as you can see, the box pattern is formed. Following, we have a square star pattern. It is very much similar to our previous pattern, but that was a hollow box pattern. But here, the only difference is that we have stars in between. So now let's have a look at the code. So here we have a counter variable I and j where initially I value is equal to 0. So 0 lesser than rows, that is if rows is equal to 5, then 0 lesser to 5, which is true, then comes to the inner for loop where j value is equal to 0. So 0 less than 5, which is again true, it prints the star. Then again it goes back to the inner for loop and increments the j value by 1. So now the j value is 1. So 1 less than 5, again is true, then prints the second star. And this will continuously repeat until the condition is not satisfied. Then once the condition is not satisfied, it comes out of the for loop and prints the statement under the outer for loop. And then the control transfers to the new line. Once comes out, it just increments the I value by 1. So now the I value is 1. So again, it checks the condition, I lesser than rows. So this will continue until it prints the pattern in a box shape. So now let's execute the program. So as you all can see the screen, the row value is 5. So now we have the variables I and j. So similarly, as I discussed before, it prints until it make a pattern of a box. So now let's try to execute. Yeah, we got the pattern, a box shape pattern. Now let's get into the number patterns. So first, we have right angle triangle number pattern program. So here, let's understand in the form of a matrix. So here, we have rows and columns where the first column is filled with the number 1, second column is filled with the number 2, and similarly 3, 4 and 5. So here, the first cell has the number 1 and followed by the 4 spaces. Similarly, second row have 2 numbers followed by 3 spaces. We have already discussed the logic how the right angle triangle is print. So now let's have a look at the code. So here, let's look at the code. So this is very much similar to our first program, but the only difference is here we are taking a j value instead of star. So it prints the numbers. So let's run the program. So here, as you can see the code, the row is initialized to 5. So we have 5 rows, and here it prints the value of j, that means the numbers. Instead of star, we are using the numbers. So now let's try to run the code. And here we got the output. This is the right angle triangle pattern in using numbers. So next we have another right angle triangle number pattern program. So here we have a numbers as in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But in our previous pattern, the whole first column was the number 1 and second column was the number 2. So here, to understand in the form of a matrix, the first row and first column we have the number 1, and the second row, first column we have 2 and followed by 3, and similarly 4, 5, 6 and so on. So now let's try to understand the logic. It is very much similar to our previous program, and this right angle triangle is also called as a Floyd's triangle, where we have one extra k variable, that is the counter variable, which is used to print the value. That means here it prints the k value and increments on every iteration. So instead of using j, we are using k++. So now let's try to run the program. So here, as you can see, it's very much similar to our previous program, but the only difference is that we have a k is equal to 1. So here we are taking the k value in order to print the Floyd's triangle. So let's run the program. And here we got the output. So here we got the right angle triangle number pattern program. Next we have the pyramid number pattern program, so which is also called as a Pascal's triangle. So when we learn it in a form of a matrix, then it is very much similar to the pyramid pattern, but the only difference here is we are using numbers instead of stars. So now let's have a look at the code. So here, as you can see, we have a for loops and we have the counter variables I, j and k. So here we are using a temporary variable. So if this if statement satisfied, that is k is equal to 0 or I is equal to 0 and temp value is equal to 1, else temp is equal to, the formula is temp into I minus k plus 1 divided by k. Then it will print the numbers in a form of a pattern, that is in a pyramid pattern. So now let's have a look at the output. So here, as I discussed earlier, the row value is equal to 5 and we have temporary variable which is initialized to 1 and we have the counter variables I, j and k. So here we have a for loop which is the outer for loop. So if I is equal to 0, that is 0 lesser 2 rows, if the condition satisfied, it comes to the inner for loop where the j value is 1 and j must be lesser or equal to row minus 1. If this condition satisfied, it prints the space. Then it comes to the next for loop where k value is equal to 0 and k is lesser to I. That means k must be lesser to I or lesser or equal to I. So once it comes to the if statement where it checks k is equal to 0 or I is equal to 1, where temporary equal to 1, else we have a formula where temp is equal to temp into I minus k plus 1 divided by k. So then it will print a number in form of a pattern, that is in a pyramid pattern. So now let's run the program. And here we have a pattern, which is a Pascal's triangle. Up next we have a box pattern, number pattern program. So in this, it is very much similar to a box, or we can also say a square pattern, but instead of stars, we are using numbers. So we have already executed a program based on a box pattern. So this is very much similar to that, but there we have used stars. So in this pattern, we are using numbers. So the numbers are 1 and 0. So we have equal number of rows and columns. So now let's have a look at the code. So here we have a for loop and we have a variable num, and we have a if statement. So only if this condition satisfied, that is I modulus 2 is equal to 0, then num is equal to 1, then enters the for loop where int j is equal to 1, j lesser or equal to rows, and j plus plus. Then it prints a number in place of star, and then it checks the condition or a formula, we can say, or this is an expression where num is equal to num, condition num is equal to 0, or we have print 1 else print 0. So if num is equal to 0, then it prints 1, else it will print 0. Then we have num is equal to 1, so we have another for loop where we have int j is equal to 1, j lesser or equal to rows, j plus plus. So here if j is equal to 1 and j is lesser or equal to rows, it prints the number, that is the num is equal to 0. So if this satisfies, it prints 1, else it prints 0, else it will transfer the control to the next line. So now let's try to execute the program. So as I discussed before, here we have the rows value equal to 5 and we have a counter variable I and j. So initially the I value is 1, checks whether I is lesser or equal to row. If yes, then we have a if statement where it says I modulus 2 is equal to 0 and we have initialized the num value to 0. Then we have a for loop where j is equal to 1 and j must be lesser or equal to rows. It prints the number, and the number that we are going to print is either 1 and 0. So if this condition satisfies, that is num is equal to 0, it will print 1, else it will print 0. Similarly, we come in the else part where we have num is equal to 1, where we have a for loop where j is equal to 1, 1 lesser or equal to rows, and j plus plus. It prints if this condition satisfies, that is j lesser or equal to rows, then it prints a number. And here again, when this number is equal to 0 is assigned to number, when this condition satisfied, it prints 1, value 1, else it will print the value 2. Else, if this condition not satisfied, the control comes outside, prints the new line. So now let's try to execute. And here we got the output where we have a box pattern using numbers. Now let's get into the another part of this session, that is alphabet pattern. So first let's have a look at the right angle triangle alphabet pattern. So here in the first row and first column we have A. Similar to the stars and the number programs that we have worked, similarly we have an alphabet. So here we have a alphabet first and then followed by 4 spaces, and then in the second row we have alphabet A, B and followed by 3 spaces and so on. So now let's have a look at the code. So it's very much similar to the star pattern or right angle triangle star pattern and number pattern, but here instead of star or numbers, here we are using alphabets. So we have this char j plus alphabets. So this is used in order to print the alphabets in order or in a pattern of right angle triangle. Let's run the code. So here we have the alphabet is equal to 64. So it takes the ASCII value. So let's run this code. As you can see, we got a right angle triangle alphabet pattern program. Next pattern is inverted right angle triangle. So we have already executed a pattern based on the star, but here we have alphabets. So here in the first row we have 5 alphabets, and in the second row we have 4 alphabets and followed by 1 space, and in the third row we have 3 alphabets followed by 2 spaces, and similarly we have fourth row with 2 alphabets and 3 spaces, and so on. So now let's have a look at the code. So it is very similar to the inverted star pattern, but here we are using alphabets instead of numbers. So here we have alphabet plus j, which is used to insert the alphabets. So let's execute the program. So here, in order to get inverted right angle triangle, we have I is equal to rows minus 1, and I must be greater or equal to 0, and we have post decrement operator. So once this condition is satisfied, it comes into the inner for loop where j value is equal to 0 and j must be lesser or equal to I, and if this satisfies, it prints the alphabet. So according to this, in first row it prints 5 alphabets. Then once the condition is not satisfied, it comes out. That means the control transfer to the new line and then decrement the I value by 1, and this will continue till it prints the inverted right angle triangle pattern program. So now let's execute. And here we have an inverted right angle triangle program using alphabets. Next we have pyramid alphabet pattern. It is similar to the pyramid that we have executed, but here we are using alphabets instead of numbers or stars. So let's have a look at the code. So in order to print the alphabets, here we have the alphabet, that is a variable which is equal to 65, and this will print the ASCII value of A. And here we have the counter variables, that is I, J and K. So initially the I value is 0, so 0 should be lesser or equal to 4, which is true. It comes to the inner for loop and it says the initial value of J is equal to 4. So 4 greater to I, that is initially I value is 0, so 4 is greater to 0, which is true. So it prints the space, that is the empty space. So this will continue until the condition is satisfied. Once the condition is not satisfied, it comes out for this for loop and checks the condition. So the K must be lesser or equal to I. If it satisfies, then it will print an alphabet, that is alphabet plus K. So now let's try to run the program. So as you can see, we have alphabet, that means it prints alphabets in a form of a pyramid shape. So now let's run it. Yeah, we got the output. Now let's try to have a look at this special pattern. So in this special pattern, we are trying to use two symbols, that is star and hyphen. So using star and hyphen, we are trying to have a pattern of a half diamond. So now let's have a look at the code. So here, this is the first half of a program where it prints the right angle triangle. So it is very much similar, but here we are using the hyphen, and then in this next for loop we are using star. And in the inverted right angle triangle, that is the second half of the pattern, here we are using star and then the hyphen. So now let's try to run the program. So here in this special pattern program, we are using star plus hyphen. So this will be a first half of the program which will print the right angle triangle, and this will be the inverted right angle triangle. So using this, we are trying to have a half diamond pattern. So now let's try to run it. And here we got. We have used star hyphen, and we have formed a pattern called half diamond. So this would be our last program for this session. This is very interesting program. So let's execute it. As you can see, the Christmas tree pattern is executed. But I want you to execute this program and understand the logic and comment on the comment section below. Don't worry about the code. I had already mentioned that the code that I am executing in this session will be attached in the description box below. So you can have a look at it and execute the pattern programs for a better understanding. And if you face any issues while executing the programs, then please let us know in the comment section below, and our team of experts will be happier to resolve all your queries at the earliest. So with this, we have come to the end of this session on the pattern programs in C. I hope this session was informative and interesting. Until next time, thank you, stay safe and keep learning.
Hi there, if you like this video, subscribe to the Simplilearn YouTube channel and click here to watch similar videos. To nerd up and get certified, click here.